Right, what's up, y'all? So we are here today talking about emergency preparedness, and I'm really excited to bring this information to you because it's something that's been on my mind for some time now, and I've been secretly and slowly in the background for several years, kind of getting myself ready for different kinds of emergencies. Now, I've had some people ask me, like, why the heck are you talking about emergency preparedness when you're in nutritional therapy and lifestyle coaching business, And I think it fits perfectly with what we're trying to do with the people that we work with, because when you think about it, we're trying to teach self-reliance and we're trying to teach self-efficacy. And when people learn how to eat real food from us and they learn how to become metabolically flexible, there's a sense of freedom that comes from that. There's a sense of self-reliance and confidence that comes from that. And as over the years, I've learned different things that have made me healthier and made me feel better about myself. Those are things I always incorporate into what we teach. So in the beginning, we mainly taught nutrition, and then I realized how important sleep was, and then I realized how important meditation and mindfulness were, and then I realized how important being outdoors and grounding was. So every time I learn something that I feel like has been crucial and integral in my own personal health journey and my own confidence and self-reliance, it's something that I want to share with other people, because I'm like, why not, right? And so this concept around emergency preparedness, it's not a pessimistic view of, like the possibility of bad things happening. It's a realistic view of what could happen. And the more that we're prepared for the unknown, the more confidence we're going to have. And just like everything else that we do in the SHT, we break this down into a very simple framework, step by step, easy to do. It's not a whole lot of complicated processes. It is a little bit of money to be fully prepared, but at the same time, once you have the stuff in place, it's in place and you're good to go. So I'm excited to bring this to you guys. Now, I know that some of you with us may not be a part of our community, may not be a part of or connected with us. So I'd highly recommend, as a first step to connect with us, make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter at superhumantransformation.com, or you can use the QR code here. And then I'd highly recommend that you join our freaking amazing community, Superhumans United, because it's freaking amazing. This is where we house all of our courses. We have a great community. We backed out of Facebook years ago, and we've created our own community here, and it's better than Facebook because there's no ads, there's no drama. We absolutely love it. What we're doing together, our big purpose is we're bringing together people who for most of their lives have been lost or confused or at least unsure when it comes to certain topics. And so we're learning health concepts together. We're putting those concepts into practice, and we're supporting each other throughout the entire process so that we can gain clarity and confidence in what it is that we're doing, so that we can be happy and healthy and be in some bodies that we're comfortable with and live the most amazing life possible. And we're doing some amazing things in there. We usually have a monthly theme that has a monthly focus. Within that monthly theme, we have a couple of seminars every month that are always recorded and put into the community as courses. And then we usually introduce new members as they come in with a new member highlight. That's usually most Tuesdays. We have a massive recipe index with a ton of great recipes. The recipe index alone is freaking awesome. And then we also have inspirational things people can post as users, as members, motivation, inspiration, wins, challenges. And then we usually have a couple of questions and polls every week that kind of help people to communicate with each other and get excited about interacting with each other and get to know each other a little bit better. Okay? Cool. So if you're not a part of that, join us. Now, why this talk? Well, because we would say you never know. Like, you never know what's going to happen. I'm going to attempt to play a video here, just small sections of it. This is from FEMA, and this is about preparing for the unknown, all right?
Started as any other day. I didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was. You never know what can happen. Unforgettable. There was heavy rain to the point where you couldn't even see.
All you could hear stuff around you being smashed and crashed. Huge things that you would think would never move, and they were being thrown around like it was a toy. It was devastating. The power of the water, it'll eat you up in a second.
The most frightening moment would be the concern that you have for your children, making sure that they were okay.
We didn't know what to do. It was terrifying.
We were actually without power for 4 weeks. It was the whole town of Scotch Plains without power. It became too cold where we couldn't even stay in the house.
We were freezing cold, and we would sleep in the car.
with the heat on, shut it off once the car got warm enough. That's how we were able to fall asleep.
You couldn't really ignore what was going on around you. You really just see how much everyone cared for each other in this community.
The dangers of Mother Nature, you don't know where it's going to hit or how it's going to hit.
So you just have to prepare yourself mentally. Being that you don't know the outcome, you could be prepared for whatever does happen.
Personal preparedness, not just for a wildfire, a tornado, or an earthquake, but to be prepared for 24, 48, and 72 hours on your own is really vital throughout the country. Natural disasters occur. That's just the way of life. If you haven't been affected, you will.
All right, cool. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Knowing your area, connecting with emergency alerts in different ways, the different types of sheltering to consider, evacuation, family communication plan, safeguard critical documents, and how to build a kit and or build some bags. All right. And again, this is a simplified process. I think you're going to find it super, super useful and powerful. So the first thing we want to consider is knowing your area. Now, what do we mean by knowing your area? We mean every area is going to have its own potential for different kinds of emergencies and disasters, and I think it's useful to just know beforehand what could potentially affect you in your area. So the easiest way to do this would be to Google your state and emergency preparedness, because every state has its own emergency preparedness department. And so when you Google, for instance, I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada, I Google Nevada State Emergency Preparedness, then they have a website dedicated to emergency preparedness for Nevada. And one of the first things that you'll see on there is a list of different threats. And so in Nevada, we have active shooter, bioterrorism, cybersecurity, earthquake, extreme heat, flood, radiological information, thunderstorms and lightning, tornadoes, wildland fire. Okay, those are the main threats that we probably might encounter at some point in the future. And I don't know that there's anything more that we want to do with this aside from being aware about these different threats. When you click on each one of these threats, you can learn some more. But the rest of this process that we're going to learn together is going to prepare you for any kind of threat for the most part, okay? But it is very useful to understand what threats you might impact you in your area. All right, so let's next talk about connecting with emergency alerts. Emergency alerts are going to come through various different channels, and we want to make sure that we have access to this information through different channels in case one channel doesn't work. All right, so the first thing we want to do is make sure that we have alerts turned on our cell phone. So on the iPhone, I'm sure it's pretty similar with the Android system or platform. You just want to go to your notifications, and then once in notifications, scroll down until you find emergency alerts and make sure that those emergency alerts are turned on in every way possible. And that will ensure that you're getting emergency alerts through your phone. Now, another couple of great things to do would be to choose these two applications that I think are very useful. The first one is the American Red Cross Emergency Alerts. It's a free application, and it's based on your geographical location, and then also the FEMA application. And both of those are going to send you emergency alerts through their different system, and maybe they have different information. I've already received a couple of emergency alerts through the Red Cross app for extreme heat considerations, which I thought was kind of useful. All right. Now, in the event that we don't have our cell systems working for some reason, or we don't have the ability to get data notifications, then we want to have a backup option, and that would be to use an NOAA weather radio. Now, these all hazards radio, it's a nationwide network of radio stations that broadcast continuous weather information from the nearest National Weather Service office based in your physical location. So this is relevant to the area that we live. It also broadcasts official warnings and watches and forecasts and other hazard information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it also broadcasts alerts of non-weather emergencies, such as national security or public safety threats, through the emergency alert system. So I happen to pick up a couple of these, and there's a bunch of different ones if you go on Amazon and just search for NOAA weather radio. I like this one because you can see it fits in the palm of my hand. It's super sturdy, it's super simple, super basic. You can charge it up with a USB cord, you can charge it up with a hand crank, and I've let it run for a while, and it's very useful. You just, when you turn to the weather band radio, first of all, it's got an AM/FM radio on it, but then when you turn to the weather band radio, then you just have this constant information about weather information. So I think that would really be a great backup system to have on hand, and we'll talk about where to keep that here in just a little bit. Next, let's talk about sheltering. Now, what we mean by sheltering is providing a climate that you can live in for a specified period of time, okay? Now, in the case of an emergency, in the place where you live, in the city you live, or in your neighborhood or in your area, local authorities may not immediately be able to provide information on what is happening and what you should do. Sometimes it takes some time to put that information out. You definitely want to listen to the radio and or check the internet for official news and instructions, but in the meantime, when you understand and know that something is happening and you don't have any other information, you may want to shelter in place. What that means is sheltering in your home and making sure that you're protected. And so what we recommend is bringing your family and pets inside and locking all your doors. Take your emergency supply kit with you, grab any weapons that you have, and go into an interior room with few windows and one door that ideally has a bathroom. All right, so you want to be able to kind of protect yourself from the outside environment, outside threats, outside contaminants, and that means one door, maybe one window, and definitely a bathroom if at all possible. And this is when you don't have any other information. If you're in a situation where you know that there's a threat of contamination outside that you're trying to avoid, then you'd want to start to seal yourself up in this sheltering in place. So you'd lock your doors, close your windows, close your air vents and your fireplace dampers, turn off your fans and air conditioning and forced heating systems. You'd take your emergency kit inside this room that you've decided to shelter in place in, and then you'd start to seal all your windows and doors and vents with some thick plastic, and you'd want to use some duct tape, and you probably want to have this ahead of time. This is something that we recommend having in your emergency preparedness kit. And so this way you're protecting yourself from the outside world, you're sealing yourself in. This may be slightly indefinite, it may be based on further information coming from different emergency information sources. All right, and then if sheltering in place is not an option, or if sheltering in place you figured out it's necessary for you to leave your area or your neighborhood for some reason, what's great about that FEMA app is you can also find a shelter on the FEMA app based on your zip codes. You can text FEMA, ask for different shelter locations, they'll send you a link. Their application also has the ability to search for shelter locations. One of my favorite to be prepared with is making sure that you have a shelter relatively with you. So you may want to have this in your bug out bag. You may want to have a shelter in your vehicle. Something that's maybe not in the top notch and huge or anything, but something that if you had to, you could live in it for a few days. So I do like the idea of having a small tent and some things to sleep with, like a sleep kit, available either in your bug out bag and or in your vehicle, just in case you need it for some emergency situation. All right, cool. So let's talk about evacuation. So evacuation means leaving your area. Now, there's different levels of evacuation, right? And there's an infinite number of things that could potentially happen out there. So we don't know all the different scenarios. But let's just say that there's a scenario where you have to meet your family and or your loved one or this little team that you've created, and you have to meet somewhere in your neighborhood. Okay, you're not meeting in your house, you're meeting in your neighborhood. So I recommend having a neighborhood meeting spot. So the people that I care about and am close to, we have our home, which you can see on this small map here. And our first neighborhood meeting spot is the dog park outside of the place that we live. And if for whatever reason roads are shut off and we can't make it to that dog park, then our second neighborhood meeting place is my office here, which is just about a mile from there, and I could walk here easily. But that's our two relatively close neighborhood meeting places. Now, you also want to have an out-of-neighborhood meeting place. And again, there's an infinite number of situations that could happen, but just imagine being in a situation where there's some kind of emergency happening and you can't get to anything in your neighborhood because roads are shut down. Well, then you'd want to have an out-of-neighborhood meeting spot. And so the places that we've chose have been, relatively close, within about 10 miles. One of them's up to 95, up on Sky Canyon Point exit, and then one of them's up to 15, which is on our way to our ultimate relocation spot. And so again, our first spot is going to be meeting at the 95, at that exit at North 95, and if for whatever reason that's not available, then we have the secondary exit. Now, ultimately, you want to have city or locations along a city or location along every route going outside your main city. So if we look at Las Vegas, one of the useful tools that I found on the internet was the radius tool. And you can draw a radius of, and I would recommend maybe 150 miles to 300 miles. Why? Because that's about how much gas most of us have to get out of the city. So if you draw a radius about 150 to 300 miles, you'll find that there's certain cities that follow along the main roads that come out of your city. And so I think what would be really useful to have is an idea of which cities you would meet up at based on which roads were available to get out of the city. And so out of Las Vegas, we have the 95, we have the 15, we have 93, and then we also have 15 going south. And so we've got some strategic cities located at these different areas. Imagine there's a citywide emergency or disaster and some of the main roads are shut down, but some of them are still open. Well, then we know based on the open roads that that's where we'd go, and hopefully we can get in touch with each other through some kind of a text message or something. Now, ultimately, you want to have an ultimate relocation spot, which is a place that you would probably go to live indefinitely. All right, our ultimate relocation spot is up in Utah, or Idaho, sorry. And you may have something somewhere with some friends, with some family members in the area that you know is safe and well protected and far away from where you live right now. And so you have these different options so that if you have something minor, you've got a neighborhood meeting place, you've got an out neighborhood meeting place, and then you've got these locations that are slightly outside the city in case you have to leave the city, and then you have this ultimate relocation spot so that, heaven forbid, if you had to take off for a significant period of time, you'd have this place that you could go and live for a little bit. Another thing that we recommend is getting familiar with different modes of transportation in your area. So when we research what we have available to us here in Las Vegas, there's a bus transit system. And so one of the things that we're going to do as a future project is spend a whole day jumping on the bus and using the bus system and trying to figure out the maps and stops and how to get around on the bus system. I don't know that I can imagine a situation where the bus system would work but we can't use our cars, but I'm sure it's possible, right? So it's useful to know what other modes of transportation you have in your area. I know that we used to have Amtrak here in Las Vegas, and I heard that we're bringing it back. So if we have Amtrak coming to Vegas, then we're going to get familiar with Amtrak and take a trip on a train, okay? Now, one of the resources that we provide for everyone that attends this class and is in our community is our emergency communication plan, which actually has fillable spots for all these emergency meeting places. All right, so if you're not a part of our freaking community, join our community at community.superhumantransformation.com, and these resources are all packaged there with the course. All right, so we just mentioned the family communication plan or emergency communication plan, and so let's talk about what goes into this. First of all, if there's an emergency, some situation happening, even if the data system on the cell phones isn't working very well, it's always recommended that you use text messages first, because a lot of times SMS text messages will still get through to phones even though you can't make phone calls and you can't use the data network. So an emergency communication plan is basically having a paper copy of all the important contact information and other useful information that you think you need. You want to make sure that you share that with your family members, with the people that you're closely connected to, and then you want to practice it, which means that you want to stay in contact with these people, and every now and then you want to check with them and make sure they still have this information on hand, right? I'm picturing like once a month, getting with the people that you care about or they're part of your family or your close-knit network, and just asking, hey, do you have your emergency communication plan in your EDC bag? Do you have your emergency communication plan in your WTFU bag? Do you have your emergency communication? Have you updated it lately? Something along those lines. And just taking a look at it maybe once a month or once a quarter. Now, what we're going to have in this emergency communication plan is going to be a family communication plan, which includes the home number and the home address, and then the contact information, including the mobile number, email, social media handles, and any other important medical or other information per family member. We've got 6 spots for different people on this. All right, another part of this emergency communication plan is going to be school, child care, caregiver, and workplace information. And again, this gives you the ability to write down some names, some addresses, some emergency phone numbers and websites, emergency plan and pickup information. And then we also have some additional emergency contacts that you could list here. So these are people outside of your immediate family. It might be some relatives, it might be some really close friends in some other states. And then we have a space for our emergency meeting places, which includes neighborhood, out of city, and out of state. And then we have a spot for other numbers and information, which include police information, fire information, poison control, doctors, pediatrician, dentist, medical insurance, policy information, a hospital pharmacy, and insurance information, basically everything that you would need to literally start over in the event that you had to leave and you couldn't take much else with you. At least you had this information, you could get in touch with each other, and you also had the information that you need to contact all these different important resources. And again, these handouts are a part of the course inside our community at community.superhumantransformation.com. All right, next let's talk about safeguarding critical documents. So in the event that there's an emergency, you want to make sure that you have access to the most important information that you could possibly have. All right, so we've talked about a lot of stuff already. The first priority is your own personal safety and the safety of your family. But also think about going through an emergency, having to leave really fast, not being able to go back home or not knowing when you could go back home. You want to make sure that you have identification, contact information, financial information, medical records, whatever you feel like is necessary to help you start over somewhere else or to identify yourself as you go in different places. You want to make sure that you incorporate this information into an encrypted USB flash drive and into your kits and bags as you feel appropriate. We'll talk about each one of those. All right, so we have a couple of handouts where we have some recommendations about critical documents and valuables. On the critical documents and valuables, first of all, we have household identification. So every person in the family needs to have their own information here. Birth certificate, marriage certificate, divorce certificate, adoption, child custody papers, passport, driver's license, social security card, green card, military service ID, pet ownership papers, and identification tags. You want to make sure that you have possibly an original copy of some of these, but definitely a photocopied version, and then also a photocopied version that's on your encrypted USB drive. Also, financial and legal documentation. All right, so if there's a disaster and you got to start over somewhere else, this is going to be such useful information to have. So this would include housing information like a lease or rental agreement, mortgage, home equity line of credit, deed, vehicle information including your loan documents, your VIN, your registration, your title, other financial obligations like all your different utilities and bills, and then financial accounts. So copies of your checking, savings, debit cards, retirements, and investments. What I've done is I've taken my most recent statement from my checking account and savings accounts, and I printed out those in PDF. It has the account number, it has the routing number on it, and I've also saved that on my USB drive. And then insurance policies, sources of income, including pay stubs, alimony, child support, tax statements, and then any estate planning that you have in place like a will, trust, or power of attorney. And then medical information, again, we want to have health and dental information, Medicare, Medicaid, VA health benefit information, a list of medications, immunizations, allergies, prescriptions, medical equipment devices, pharmacy information, a living will, medical power of attorney, caregiver agency contract or service agreement, disabilities documentation, and contact information for all your different doctors and specialists and dentists and pediatricians and veterinarians and things like that. All right, all of this makes sense. You'll notice that not all of it applies to everybody, right? But you'd want to go through here and figure out which things are important to you. Some of this stuff is also located on the emergency communication plan, so you don't have to be redundant with it. Finally, we've got emergency information, so for employers and supervisors, schools, house of worship, social service providers, homeowners associations, home repair services like utilities, plumber, roofer, carpenter, electrician. I can tell you right now, my sister and them had to leave their house for a little bit. They had some flooding going on down in Houston, and they were very thankful to have this information on them because from remotely they could actually contact different utilities and plumbers and roofers to come and try to fix and repair things while they were out of their home. So again, super, super useful information. Finally, I'd consider maybe having your valuables and priceless personal items either documented or logged or listed or maybe somewhere that's convenient to access. I'm not sure if you have the ability to have a safe next to all this other stuff, but just putting this as a consideration as part of this overall planning process. All right, so In addition to that list of information that we just went through, we also have a list of things that we recommend having as hard copies and hard drives to simplify the process. And again, this is the most important, crucial identification information, financial information, medical information, and emergency information that you need to have in the event that you can't make it back home. And it makes things so much easier for yourself. And again, we recommend having this on a USB drive that's encrypted. We have it printed as hard copies. Now, where you decide to keep this stuff is totally up to you. We've had some discussions about that, and we'll talk about that here when we get to the bag information. All right, so there are several options for USB drives that are encrypted, and we'll give you some recommendations there. And then there's some options for some fireproof and waterproof bags that you can keep your hard copy versions in. And again, the PDF copies and all this information, the resources and links are going to be located in the course associated with this seminar at community.superhumantransformation.com. All right, now let's get to probably the most exciting piece of this whole thing, and that is emergency preparedness bags. All right, so we have different levels of bags. We recommend having every single one of these in place to simplify the process. And we're going to go in order of size and priority. All right. So we have what we call the WTFU bag. I wonder if you can guess what that is. We'll talk about it here in a second. We have an EDC bag, which is an everyday carry bag. By the way, the WTFU bag is meant to be grabbed at a moment's notice, and it has your most important critical documents that you can grab if you have to run out of the house. EDC bag is a 12-hour bag that you carry on your person most of the time that could sustain you for a little bit. A get home bag is a 24-hour bag that has just a little bit more stuff in it that will allow you to get home in the event that you're away from home and you had to navigate home and it was going to take you about a day or so to get there. And then a bug out bag is something that you're taking from your home that will sustain you for 3 or more days in the event that you had to leave the city temporarily or even relocate to your ultimate relocation spot. So let's go through each one of these. So the WTFU bag is a wake the F up bag. This is a bag, imagine being in a situation where you only had 3 minutes to get out of your house. What would you need to grab to start your life over, right? Imagine the house is on fire and you wake up and it's too short a notice to do anything else, right? Most people don't have these things in place, and if they do, it's in some random box in a garage or stacked up in some spare bedroom or something like that. This is everything that you would need to start your life over, right? So ideally, it's next to your bed, maybe it's under your bed, maybe it's next to your nightstand, it's within arm's reach of wherever you are when you sleep. You can grab it and go, and it's small enough that it's not going to inhibit you from helping the other members of your family or household to get out of the home, and it has everything that you need to start your life over. So what we consider to be most essential in this WTFU bag is extra house and car keys, a backup USB drive with critical documents encrypted, a backup printed critical documents, emergency communication plan, and then anything that you feel like is relevant to you. Additionally, we recommend having some other things, but these things might be a part of your everyday carry bag, and so it might not be necessary to duplicate them if you keep your everyday carry bag next to you as well. So my EDC bag I keep in my bedroom next to me when I go to sleep. I take it with me to work. It goes everywhere with me for the most part. That may be overkill for some people. It's just what I do. So I'm not duplicating these things. So if you don't have these things, in an EDC bag that you carry around, then you'd probably want to incorporate it into your WTFU bag. So that would be things like illumination, like a flashlight, medications, old prescription glasses, a wallet with some cash, cell phone and or a backup dumb phone, and then your backup USB battery and charging cables, which is basically like a little charging bank for your phone that carries a lot of power. Okay, so that is your WTFU bag. That is something that you'd want to be able to grab at a moment's notice and get out of the house, and you have what you need to start your life over, and you don't have time to do anything else. The next bag is everyday carry bag. So this is something that I would envision most people having as a backpack or a duffel bag. I was looking for my EDC bag, but it's over there. This is a Go Ruck bag, and I love my Go Ruck bag, and this is my EDC bag. So in my EDC bag, what I recommend is usually having the 10 essentials. And the 10 essentials is something that we use for our hiking checklist. You don't have to keep all this stuff in there, but I do. You can go through and pick and choose which things you think are important. A lot of them may be more important for a hike than they would be for an EDC bag, but this is things like navigation, including map and compass of the area that you're going to, or GPS. sun protection, which could include sun shirt, hat, natural sunscreen, some lip balm, clothing that's appropriate to the weather that you're in, so you'd be updating your clothing as time goes on. So right now I always have in my EDC bag a long sleeve sun shirt in case I'm out in the sun and I'm just getting too much exposure, I'm getting burned, I can put this shirt on. I've always got illumination there, so I've got a headlamp, you can have like a little flashlight. A personal first aid kit would be really useful, like a 1 or 2 person first aid kit. Something to start some fire. So I have some stormproof matches in there. I have a striker with some flint, and then some tools like a knife, maybe a Leatherman tool, maybe a multi-tool, and then some food. I usually only carry maybe like 3 Epic meat bars and some chomp bars or something along those lines, maybe some honey. And then make sure that you always carry around some hydration. I usually have about 40 ounces of water that I carry in my bag. And then an emergency shelter would mean having an emergency blanket and or a bivy or a poncho or something along those lines, okay? I don't think that's too crazy to carry around all the time, but again, some of this stuff you could pull out depending if you're going hiking or not. Now, in addition to the 10 essentials, you would also want to have your WTFU bag items, right? Now, if your WTFU items are staying at your home underneath your bed, in a place that is there just for when you're getting out of the house, then when you're getting out of the house, you would put your WTFU bag inside of your EDC, and then you put that on your back, and you're good to go. Maybe some of the things that are in the WTFU bag you want to have in the EDC bag. Some people have brought up the point that they don't feel comfortable carrying around all their banking statements and documents and birth certificates and things like that. Because they're worried about someone stealing it and accessing it, and I can see that point, right? So you have to decide what it is that you want to carry with you. I would just say that you probably want to have those emergency critical documents, a copy at your home underneath your bed, and then a copy somewhere else in the event that you can't go home. So maybe like a copy at your office. I have encrypted files on a USB drive that's in my bag, and I have hard copies, and I keep that bag really close to me all the time. That's a personal preference thing, okay? Now again, all this information and checklists and things are in the handouts associated with this talk. So we've covered the WTFU bag, we've covered your everyday carry bag. Now we have what we call a get home bag. Now the get home bag is something that we envision being either at your office or somewhere that you're at all the time, most of the time during the day, and or inside your vehicle. So my get home bag is inside my vehicle. And think about it as if it was an EDC with a little bit more stuff, right? If you've already got an EDC bag that you carry around, you don't have to duplicate this information or duplicate these items. So what we want, imagine having about 24 hours that you needed to get home, and so how would you need to survive for 24 hours? You'd probably want a change of clothes, which includes, depending on what you wear on a regular basis, a pair of socks, shoes, pants, shirt, underwear, all stuffed in a nice little compression sack. You'd want to have food and water to last you a day, right? So we'd think maybe about a gallon of water, a liter to a gallon of water, plus enough food to sustain you for a day. Think about some hygiene items: toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, wipes, razor, an extra emergency communication. So this would be an NOAA radio, a signaling mirror, which I actually have a signaling mirror in my backpack, but I do have an extra NOAA radio in the Jeep in my little get home bag. And then a sleep kit. So this would be a blanket and or a sleeping bag and a pillow, and then some shelter or weather protection. It could be a tarp, a poncho, maybe even a possible tent. These are the things that I have in a duffel bag inside my Jeep just in case. I feel very confident having those things inside my Jeep because, heaven forbid, I run off the side of the road and I'm in a ditch or something. I've got some things to help me out for a little bit. But again, if you're duplicating some of these things in your EDC kit, you might not want to have both of these duplicated. Meaning you don't want to have things that you already have in your EDC kit also in your get home bag, but it's a personal preference thing. So things that you would have in your EDC kit that if you don't have in your EDC kit, we'd recommend having in that get home bag would be an extra pair of prescription sunglasses, glasses or sunglasses, first aid kit, the tools that we talked about before, which would be a headlamp, multi-tool, knife, 550 cord, some gloves, and then some navigation items. All right, so again, this get home bag is designed to get you home from being away from home in the event that you're stranded somewhere and you need to survive for about 24 hours to get there. Now the final bag is the bug out bag. The bug out bag is something that you're keeping at your home in the event that something happens and you have to evacuate. whether it's for 24 hours, a few days, maybe a little bit longer. Ideally, this is going to sustain you for about 3 days, maybe up to a week. This is designed for short-term evacuation, which you'd need to survive for a few days plus. And then you have to have things like your clothing, your water, your medications, your toiletry, food, blanket, pillows, lighting, toys, books, movies, games, document backups. It needs to be ready at a moment's notice. It needs to be somewhere in the home that's easy to grab. It should sustain you for at least 3 days. And it should be something that you can grab and carry on your back and or in your hands. Okay, so it's not a bunch of things that you're going to have to make multiple trips out to the car. Okay, it's not meant to replace everything in your home. You're thinking about it as something that is going to sustain you for 3 days, like you're going as an uninvited guest to somebody else's house and you're bringing what it is that you feel like you need to survive for a few days. Okay, so think about the bug out bag as your EDC combined with 3 days worth of living stuff. So we've got a nifty little checklist here. We'll go through some of the important items. So non-perishable food for 3 days plus. We've got water for 3 days plus. We usually recommend a gallon per person. And again, this bug out bag is per person. So everyone's going to have to carry their own weight if something happens, right? A cell phone battery charger, an NOAA powered radio with a hand crank. We always have that in our bug out bag. Flashlight and headlamp with extra batteries, first aid kit, emergency first aid book. Very, very useful. I'll make a recommendation on that here in just a moment. An emergency whistle, dust masks in case there's some kind of air contaminants that we need to protect ourselves from, or a bunch of dust from an explosion or something. We mentioned before plastic sheeting and duct tape for sheltering in place, some moist towelettes, garbage bag and ties, and this is for pooping and using the bathroom. And then non-sparking wrench or pliers, you can find these on Amazon to allow you to turn on or off power and other utilities. Can opener for foods, prescription meds and glasses, infant formula and diapers if that applies to you, pet food, water and supplies for your pet if that applies to you, important documents in a waterproof container. We'd recommend having some cash on hand, maybe $500 to $1,000. I'm not sure what's reasonable there. A sleeping bag and a warm blanket, a change of clothes per person, long sleeve shirt, long pants and shoes, a rain jacket, a shell jacket, and a cold weather jacket, fire extinguisher, matches in a waterproof container, feminine supplies and personal hygiene items and a hand sanitizer, some bowl, plate, cup, utensils, and paper towels. We actually have some stainless steel bowls and plates and some titanium sporks, notebook, paper, pen, pencil, books, games, puzzles, other activities, and any weapons that you may have in the house, or at least one of each of what you may have if you have a lot of weapons. Okay. So I think that's a pretty great list for the bug out bag. And remember, you're not trying to take everything that's in your home. You're trying to take the most important things that you need to survive for a few days plus, okay? Now, I mentioned before, in the event that there's an emergency, you've got your first aid kit. The first aid kit that I have in my EDC bag is like a 1 or 2 person first aid kit. It's about this big. The first aid kit that I have in our bug out bag is a little bit bigger and it's a little bit more comprehensive. I also think it's very useful to have a kind of like a medical procedure handbook that is designed for people that are not medical professionals, that is in layman's terms. And so the best one that I found so far is the Survival Medicine Handbook. Super solid. It's got just about everything that could possibly happen to you in there as a reference and resource so that you can handle any situation that pops up. We also talked about different types of foods. And so when it comes to foods, especially these non-perishable items, I would focus on nutrient density and caloric density. So my favorite top picks are going to be beef jerky, things like canned sardines and salmon and things like that. Honey is a superfood. It never goes bad. It never perishes. And then some healthful fats like some ghee or coconut oil to sustain you. So these things would give your body what it needs to function properly. They would also give you a lot of great useful energy. You could probably throw in some things like some dried plantain chips or some other safe starches or something along those lines. And again, we're looking at 3 days worth of food. So I would say that's about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of food, or 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of meat, plus some fat and some honey. And that would sustain most of us pretty easy. I mean, most of us could probably fast for a few days, right? But this would be ideal to have in place, okay? All right, so that is our emergency preparedness class. And again, this information we have been kind of brooding over for the past few years, slowly but surely putting our stuff together. We've taken several survival and emergency preparedness classes. We've learned from FEMA. There's a lot of great resources at ready.gov. We'll share everything that we've learned from in our resources associated with this talk. But just keep in mind, like everything that we do with the SHT, we clarify the confusion and we bring confidence to the people that we work with by simplifying everything down to what it is that you need to know. And I feel like this was both a comprehensive list of things to consider and at the same time simplified enough that most of us could put it into practice no problem. And I'm telling you right now, having this stuff in place gives you a lot of confidence. It really does. I know that if something happened, me and Arnica and the people that I care about are going to be completely fine, okay? Now, like I said before, if you haven't joined our newsletter, join our newsletter at superhumantransformation.com. There's a little pop-up that's there that you can easily join. You can scan this QR code. Also, if you're not a part of our freaking community, it's awesome. Superhumans United at community.superhumantransformation.com. It's an awesome place. Like we mentioned before, look, there is tremendous joy in being a part of something bigger than yourself. And there is tremendous joy in working towards a common goal with other people. And there's tremendous personal satisfaction and accomplishment in building skills and getting better, especially when you do it with others. And there's a sense of comfort that comes from being able to be vulnerable and navigate challenges with others. And that's what this place is all about. It's not just about education and experimentation. It's really about the community aspect. And the bigger it gets, the better it gets. We'd love to see you guys in there. All right? All right. If you got any questions, comments, or feedback, or snide remarks, send them our way. Y'all take care.